So it falls on me tonight to introduce your proposition speakers for the debate and perhaps exact my revenge. Mr. Ben Sullivan, the librarian-elect, often describes himself as a solid 7 out of 10.
Point of interest?
Yes?
Information. Point of information?
Yes?
Yes, you said you would strike your revenge?
For some of the introductions he gave me.
Sounds a bit aggressive.
Oh, well, it was a joke.
Really?
Yes. His accolades include a paper speech in the Queen and Country debate and learning Russian. He's also a member of the notorious Christchurch group, which describes itself as the Banter Squadron. Ex-Secretary Liz Culliford, having retired from the union, is now storming the world of student journalism. Impressively, she made both the Oxdew Top 50 and Cherwell 40. Michael Barrymore is a quiz show and light entertainment celebrity. Highlights of his career include Strike It Lucky, My Kind of People and Kids Say the Funniest Things. He's in fact our President Joey's second favourite speaker in the world. However, last year, due to being persecuted by the press, he officially killed his stage personality, as I understand it, and he now accuses the tabloid press of destroying his career. Mr. President, these are your proposition speakers, and they are most welcome.
That's the first I've heard of that.
So tonight I will argue that journalists are essential. They are more valuable to us than politicians, celebrities, businessmen, or anyone else who features in the news. While those who make the news perform important functions in society, they also have the power to threaten our freedom. Journalists are the ones who hold the powerful to account. Now, I think the proposition speaker sort of slightly confused. For me, I would slightly object to his definition of make the news. By make the news, I understand someone who is in the news, not simply taking the news and crafting it into something that you'd like. I wouldn't call that making the news. I'd call making the news the one, you are the person who is in the story. You are doing things and performing actions which are newsworthy. And that is, I believe, the case that the opposition is going to present tonight. So of course it's true that since the phone hacking scandal, the legitimacy...
Who decides what? Sorry, I'm talking to her. Who decides what? Well, accept what?
I'll take one in a second. I'll take one in a second.
Oh, God, I had all this last time. It's absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, carry on.
So...
Yeah, what?
The fact is that the role of journalists is being questioned.
Would you accept it?
And no one in the opposition would defend the practices condemned in the Leveson inquiry. However, it would be wrong to conclude that the importance of the press has been diminished because of these activities. Despite everything they've done, they are still vital to a healthy society. I have three main arguments to show that reporting news is better than making it. Firstly, those who report the news scrutinise the actions of the powerful people who make the news, holding them to account. Secondly, a free press is vital to free speech. Without it, we have no forum in which different opinions can be expressed. And finally, genuine democracy can only exist if we value the rights of reporters above those of people who make the news. As Thomas Jefferson said, it is preferable for a free people to have newspapers without a government than to have government without newspapers. So, to my first point, the press are the principal means by which we scrutinise those in power. Now, you might think that we have other institutions to scrutinise the powerful. After all, Parliament and courts exist to expose and punish people's mistakes and crimes, and their own. But the press are uniquely capable of performing this scrutinising function for two reasons. Firstly, other institutions like Parliament and the courts themselves have power. It is in their interest to protect that power, so they can't be trusted to scrutinise themselves. But those that report the news have no power of their own. Their interests are the same as the public, as it is the public who support them. The public buys their newspapers, they watch their television programs. Journalists, then, can be trusted to scrutinise people in a way that no one else can, not because they're better people, but because it is in their interest to expose mistakes and crimes. Second, to scrutinise, you need information. It's no good having institutions with the power to punish wrongdoing if they can never prove that wrongdoing has taken place. Journalists are the ones who do that. If we didn't have journalists, information would only be possessed by those who make the news. Indeed, journalism takes information from a privileged few and distributes it to the many. So much of the information we have today we would not have were it not for journalists. Take the expenses scandal. Of course, many people in Westminster knew what was going on, but the only way that the public found out and that MPs were punished and consequences actually resulted for people's actions and their conduct was when the reporters reported the news and they found out, and then the public found out. So I know the proposition will say that the press themselves have misbehaved, and we can't deny that. Of course the press have misbehaved, but it is important that no one should scrutinise their role as journalists. The press can only report the news, all the news, because it does not have the same aims as government, the executive, legislature, commerce or religion. It is, or should be, an outsider. Whilst we criticise the press for holding power without the corresponding responsibility, it is in fact this lack of responsibility which allows it to perform its role so effectively. If it had other people to answer to, other than the public who read, watch or listen to the news, it would not be able to scrutinise them. This is not to say that the press should not be responsible for its own ethical behaviour and moral standards. It is to say, however, that it is not the role of journalists to run things. They simply observe, report, inform and criticise. In politics, one is bound to a party line. In a company, one is bound to one's shareholders. In journalism, one is independent and responsibility for nothing but ensuring that the public is adequately informed. The proposition will argue that there are those who are harmed by the behaviour of reporters, and we can't deny that. Celebrities, public figures, and even ordinary citizens find themselves harassed by the media, as we saw in the phone hacking scandal. But this behaviour is not bad because it's journalism. It's bad because it's illegal, immoral, and socially unacceptable, no matter what capacity you're acting in. It is breaking the law, and journalists, like all citizens in society, are not exempt from these laws. We should apply the same standards of decency to journalists as we apply to everyone else in society. Unethical behaviour, such as phone hacking, is unacceptable not just in the context of journalism, but also in any context at all. So, now to my second point. A free press is vital to free speech. As Jefferson told us, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. It is through the press that independent and critical voices are heard. Free speech is not just being able to think and say what you want. It's also about being able to hear what other people think and say. Without the press, our access to different opinions would be severely limited, and there would be no range of views in public life. In the Leveson inquiry, it was argued that we need to hold power to account. But the power they were referring to was the power of media institutions. Now, this may be a common perception, but it's completely the wrong way around. Whilst the press was often criticised for its initial unwillingness to scrutinise each other's actions, it's more freedom, not more constraints, which will fix this. The press need to be free to scrutinise each other, as well as to scrutinise individuals and institutions. They need to be encouraged to fully perform their role and not be constrained in doing so. Of course, newspapers need to allow for a right of reply. They need to have letters pages. But this only continues to uphold the principle of free speech that we as the opposition believe so firmly in. Indeed, as the proposition speaker did indeed speak about, the transformation of journalism in recent years to digital platforms has done so much to aid this element of news and distributing information to the public. We can now have real-time news. Anyone can blog and anyone can participate in journalism through creating or reading. What the press really contributes to free speech is the ability to freely exchange ideas and information. Since views can be expressed in a forum where other people and the public at large can hear and respond to them, free speech is made accountable by a free press. If you don't like what someone's saying, you have a forum in which you can criticise his or her views. If we didn't have this forum, the government would hold us accountable for our opinions and freedom of speech would be at an end. This leads me on to my final point. In a genuine democracy, we value the rights of the people who report the news above those of the people who make the news. If we assess the foundations of a functioning democracy, one necessary element is that the electorate is well informed. Without information about what the government is doing, democratic mandates and democratic accountability cease to mean anything. So, however important the government is, if we are to remain free, we need to regard the press's role in holding government to account as more important than whatever policies our representatives may pursue. If we regulate the press too heavily, we enable governments to feel that they can do what they like without us knowing about it. In other words, we enable them to act in their own interests rather than in ours. No democracy can function if this is the case. So fundamental to all I've spoken about tonight is the assumption of freedom of the press. Yes, the press must adhere to its own ethical codes and standards, but by no means should it be constrained from performing its fundamental role. Journalism is collapsing and taking democracy with it. Our society can only function democratically if, and only if, it is the case that the actions of those who hold power are scrutinised and information is made readily available. Journalism embodies the fundamental premise of a democratic society, and might I add, the fundamental premise of this institution, and that is free speech. Hillary Clinton said that when free media is in jeopardy, all other human rights are also threatened. So in that spirit, let us continue to champion those who stand for media freedom and expose those who would deny it. And let us always work towards a world where the free flow of information and ideas remain a powerful force for progress. There will always be people who perform newsworthy actions, be they good or be they bad. But those that report it uphold our basic freedoms. They uphold democracy. It is difficult to hold power, but it's even more difficult to expose those in power. We should value those who protect the powerless many over the powerful few who make the news. For this reason, ladies and gentlemen, please oppose the motion.